Now move to Helen Waltz. She's going to speak on does Malawi's farm input subsidy program improve dietary diversity?
Okay, thanks very much. So this study is a collaboration between researchers in the UK and Malawi, and I'd like to acknowledge our study participants and the Drivers of Food Choice Competitive Grants Program and its funders, the Gates Foundation and the UK Department for International Development. So agricultural input subsidies are often considered an important way of improving agricultural productivity and food security in low and middle income countries. But there hasn't been much study of their nutritional impact. And these subsidies, they often target staple crops such as maize, but these crops tend to be calorie dense but nutrient poor. So if they resulted in a lower maize price, this may result in increased consumption of maize and reduced intake of more nutrient-rich foods. But alternatively, it may give consumers more income to then spend on other food items. So the effect of these agricultural input subsidies on food choice and dietary diversity is unclear. And we used mixed methods to examine the impact of Malawi's farm input subsidy program, which targets mostly maize, on overall food choice. So the FISP, which Miriam is going to describe in greater detail next, is a large-scale agricultural input subsidy program, and it aims to support ag production, primarily maize production, and is administered through vouchers that enable households to purchase fertiliser and hybrid seeds at reduced prices. Legume seeds are also subsidised and have been for some time, but the most common types of vouchers have been for maize seed and maize fertiliser. And malnutrition is a significant public health burden in Malawi. So here's a conceptual framework that we developed of the food system, showing that the key impacts of agricultural input subsidies on diets would likely be through improved ag productivity and through changes to people's incomes. We did this work in two regions of rural Malawi, Lilongwe district, which is in central Malawi and includes the capital city, Lilongwe, and Palombe district in southern Malawi. We collected the data at 2 time points in the post-harvest season when maize prices were expected to be low and the lean season when maize prices were expected to be high. We did household and individual surveys in 400 households in each district at 2 time points and also market surveys of food price. We did a discrete choice experiment at the second time point, which I'm going to describe briefly on the next slide. And we also did focus group discussions and semi-structured interviews with a range of stakeholders to get an understanding of stakeholder perspectives of how the FISP is working and its impact. So the discrete choice experiment, this involved simulating the context in which people would normally make food choices to get a better understanding of how a drop in the maize price would affect food choice. And we selected 5 food types. So maize, which is the staple food in Malawi and very widely and heavily consumed. Rice, an alternative to maize, but far less commonly consumed. Cabbage, a less common vegetable. Dried fish, a high protein food, and a soft drink to represent shifts, the nutrition transition and shifts to more processed foods and beverages. And people were shown 3 baskets in each scenario, and they were asked to indicate which was their preferred basket. So each person was given 10 scenario choices, like the ones on the slide. One set of 5 tasks had maize at a higher price of 400 kwacha per kilo, and the other at a lower price of 150 kwacha per kilo. So in the scenario here, marked scenario 3, the baskets all cost about $1.40, and you would be choosing which one you prefer. So do you want 2 big cups of maize and a half small cup of rice? A more diverse basket with less maize, but a cabbage, some dried fish, and a soft drink? Or basket C, which would be 2 large cups of maize, a cabbage, and a half cup of dried fish. And then in the second scenario, the price of maize is cheaper, so there are more products in the basket. And again, the choice is between basket A, basket B, or basket C. We received ethics approval for the work, both locally and from the London School. And Just moving on to the results. In this study, we examined the question of whether Malawi's farm input subsidy program affects food choice and dietary diversity, and we did this in 4 particular ways. So first we compared FISP beneficiaries and non-beneficiaries to see if there was any association between receiving the subsidy and dietary diversity. And we found no statistically significant association in the multivariate model. So this is really suggesting no evidence that participation in the FISP affects dietary diversity. With the DCE, we looked at changes in demand for maize and non-maize products with changes in the price of maize. And we found that as maize price increases, demand for maize falls and demand for non-maize products increases, but less so than the fall in the demand for maize. And then you can see that even when the price of maize falls, demand for maize still increases, but not demand for other products. So this is really suggesting that if the FISP was leading to lower maize price, people would still buy more maize and less of other products, which could perhaps be explained by this being a very food insecure population with energy deficits. We then looked at seasonal changes in food price and the relationship with dietary diversity. This here is government data. The figure presents data of maize prices in Malawi nationally, as well as separately in Lilongwe and Palombe districts between 2015 and 2018. And you can see, well, it's not so clear, but prices are often higher in May than in February, March, but there's a lot of seasonal variation in annual price variation. Maize price in Palombe district is often higher than the national average, and in Lilongwe district often lower than the national average. We then took the changes in seasons that we're interested in, and the first table here shows how from 2015 to 2016, across Malawi, maize price increased substantially by about 111%. So it more than doubled between the post-harvest and the lean seasons. But the increase was not so great in Palombe at only 9%. From 2017 to 18, the time period of our data collection, the increases were fairly small across Malawi, a 5% increase, and no increase in Lilongwe district. But there were increases of about 50% in Palombe. So this kind of suggests that while maize prices in Lilongwe district follow national averages, Palombe is doing something a bit different and might be to a greater extent driven by local changes in the supply and demand for maize. The large increase in the price of maize in Palombe of 50% compared with Lilongwe, where there was basically no increase from the official data, this was actually also reflected in the data we collected in our study. So we found that individual food prices increased by around 3 to 5% across the 2 seasons in Lilongwe and Palombe districts, but the maize price increased by 46% in Palombe. And we found no increase in the maize price in Lilongwe district. So based on this, we looked at the dietary diversity data in these 2 regions. The second table here shows that individual and household dietary diversity scores are higher in Palombe than in Lilongwe districts across the 2 time periods, and that the scores are often higher in the post-harvest season than the lean season. Very low overall, so 3 or 4 food groups out of 9 or 12 for individual and household dietary diversity. And these changes in dietary diversity by season, they're likely to be driven largely in Lilongwe district by increases in the price of non-maize foods because the price of maize held steady, and in Palombe driven by increases in the price of non-maize foods as well as by the increase in the price of maize because it increased so much. And given the role of maize in Malawian diets and the considerable increase in maize price in Palombe, we would expect, based on our hypothesised impact pathways, a larger decline in dietary diversity in Palombe and Lilongwe. But the table shows that this is the case for household but not individual dietary diversity. The reasons for this are unclear, but perhaps the discrete choice experiment gives us a hint. Our focus group discussions and stakeholder interviews for the most part suggested no or little impact. One comment from a focus group discussion participant was that income from maize has little benefit given the relatively higher prices of other food commodities. So in conclusion, our hypothesised pathways of impact suggest the FISP could be contributing to improved dietary diversity, but our analyses really are suggesting no impact of the FISP on food choices or dietary diversity in any significant way. This is probably likely to do with the way that the FISP policy is designed and implemented. The interviews and focus group discussions raise several issues, problems related to policy design and implementation that may explain this. Miriam's also got something coming up which fits in with this as well. And there's also the chronic food insecurity and energy deficits in the population, which may also explain the situation. The study has some limitations, but a key strength is that we've triangulated data from several sources to help to try and provide a more nuanced understanding of FISP impact on dietary diversity.